Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey hits theaters in a limited release on February 15th, and I just watched it. What the hell? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Written and directed by Rhys, Waterfield, and starring people like Cordell, Craig David Dowsett, Nikolai Leon, May Kelly, and many more. This is the horror tale of Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. So I'm going to go ahead and start this off by saying I'm not going to waste too much of your time, as this film seemed to have wasted my time, and I'm not going to lie, I actually already filmed a 9-minute version of this review, unedited, and then realized that my mic was not plugged in, so there was absolutely no audio. So yeah, that's a little bit frustrating, but with that said, let's go ahead and get right into my thoughts on this movie. If you guys have been watching this channel for a while, I haven't covered any recently, but I have covered dozens and dozens of horror slasher films here on the channel. I've talked about it plenty that I'm a huge fan of the campy slasher films of the 80s and 90s. It's what kind of raised me when it came to horror as a kid, and even though so many of those films are not great, I have such a love for those films, and I have such a adoration in a it's so bad it's good on so many levels. I grew up loving Chucky and Freddy and Jason and Ghostface, and while many of the films for those characters are good, there are plenty that are not all that great, and some of the enjoyment comes from them being ridiculous and campy. So it's right up my alley to watch a slasher film that has a bizarre premise that seems like something right up my alley. So when it comes to Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, the idea of a slasher horror film that takes Winnie the Pooh and Piglet and makes them murdering psychopaths, that seems right up my alley for just being bizarre, stupid, and over the top. And I didn't actually watch it, but I know that last month or within the last couple of months there was a release called The Mean One, which was a similar kind of premise but about the Grinch, where he is a murdering psychopath. And so when we go into this film, I was definitely interested to see what I was going to think about this one. There's a curiosity factor that I think is going to pull a lot of people to watch this movie. Now the question is though, is it really worth your time, or most notably, is it worth going to see it in theaters? I'll start this off by saying that I think this is a movie you should skip in theaters because it's not very good. I think this is a movie that doesn't even lean heavily in to the campy tropes and the things that you would want to see in this film to kind of have a laugh with it. Instead, it decides to have a more self-serious tone that just came off very dull, boring, and forgettable. There isn't really much when it came to the narrative or the characters in this film in any way, shape, or form, while you have bad dialogue, bad acting, and just overall forgettable moments throughout the entirety of the movie. The movie also doesn't have a through line. There are no characters or character goals that are trying to be achieved in the film. You never really care about any of these characters, as most of them are only on screen for a short period of time before being offed. And while this film does utilize really solid practical effects throughout the course of the movie, as well as some good lighting to kind of add to the atmosphere and eerie tone of the film visually, beyond those positives, this film just felt lackluster to me in every sense of the word. Again, I'm a huge fan of slasher films. I'm a huge fan of campy horror, and I was really hoping that a movie that is about Christopher Robin having pissed off Piglet and Pooh and the rest of the 100 Acre Woods gang simply because he left them and decided to, go off to college and become a doctor, as the original story goes. In the original story, in most cases, they just missed him, and it's always nice when he returns. But in this version, Pooh and Piglet have turned into vengeful a-holes and want to kill everybody. And they're the only ones we focus on when it comes to the Winnie the Pooh characters. And for anybody who's a little bit curious as to how this movie was made and Disney didn't come after these individuals. For those who don't know, Winnie the Pooh in general, the stories of Winnie the Pooh are actually public domain. So there are a couple of films, if you look over the course of the last decade or so, that have come out that have to do with Winnie the Pooh that haven't been tied to Disney and have kind of differentiated themselves in a certain way. Of course, they can't do a movie that's exactly like what Disney has done because then they might have copyright issues. But that's how a movie like this ends up being made, is because of the public domain of it all. And so, yeah, you know, again, I went into this movie hoping for a cheesy, good, dumb slasher that knew what it was, that just was gonna have fun with this stupid premise with Pooh Bear and Piglet being murderers because they're pissed off that Christopher Robin left them all those years ago. But unfortunately, the film is dull, it's bland, it doesn't even have that it's so bad it's good quality. I can't really see a lot of people being gripped by this movie in any way, shape, or form. And by the time the movie was over, I just found myself thinking, ah, man, what a shame. I was really hoping that this was going to be something that I could have had a laugh with, and I just kind of kept looking at the screen, just kind of bored because it was so self-serious. And while there are good uses of practical effects and lighting throughout the course of the film, beyond that, it just didn't work for me. And then when it comes to the actual character designs, that's part of, I guess, what's kind of funny at times, is the fact that you have Pooh Bear and Piglet just being two dudes with human hands and a human body, these dudes that are just dressed like farmers, essentially. You have Pooh literally in overalls and a plaid shirt the whole time, wearing these rubber masks that have no animation, no movement in any way. You have a scene where Pooh Bear is eating honey, and it's just a dude taking honey from his human hands up to this rubber mask that had no movement in the mouth whatsoever. And while that does sound really goofy and maybe like something you want to see, I just don't think this is a movie that's worth going to rush to theaters to see while it's part of its limited theatrical run. I think once you're seated there and you have your popcorn and your drink that you spent $15 for on top of the ticket to get in, you'll probably be looking at the screen thinking, I probably should have waited for this to have been a lazy Saturday night movie on Netflix someday down the line, or Shudder or Hulu or whatever streaming service this inevitably shows up on. Yeah, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. It's not a movie I recommend. I didn't think it was very good in any way, shape, or form. Again, I think the only things I really liked about it were the practical effects throughout. One of the other things I guess I can mention is that there are some references in the dialogue to some of the original source material, which at times was a little bit clever or goofy enough to kind of give me a chuckle. But beyond that, this is a movie that could have been a fun, stupid slasher film, but ultimately just leaned into being too serious, and I never cared about the characters, and there's no story. There's literally no story to latch on here to at all. There's nothing about this movie that has a streamlined narrative to follow in any way, shape, or form. None of our characters have goals or anything they're trying to achieve throughout the course of the film. There's no drive. There's nothing to fight for. There's really nothing about this film that gives you any sense of stakes and anything to latch onto the characters with. So that's going to be my thoughts on Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. So leave comments down below, hit that like button, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.